Agnir Murda Chakshushi Chandra Suryo Vishaha Shrotrivak Vividhasha Vedaha Vayu Prana Hridaya Vishvamasha Padbayam Prithivihi Sarvabhutantaratma Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Verily, that one divine presence is the indwelling consciousness in all beings and all things. Fire is its head, the sun and moon its two eyes. The revelation of Scripture is its cosmic mind. The universe is its heart, its arms and legs the four directions. The wind is its breath, music is its voice. And from its feet, the earth has originated. In all that shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us, may that Brahman sustain us, and may that Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. We have now gathered for a third and final class in this series, subtitled What the Western Man or Mind Needs to Learn from the Ancient Eastern Philosophies. Particularly, we hold up the Darshana, the path of clear seeing of Vedanta in our order, in SRV order, very deeply attached to our teachers in the Ramakrishna order. So in that way, we have come in front of you for years and years, let's just say decades, presenting hosts of classes on this wisdom. When this recent class series came into view, then I was thinking a stroll through the Varaha Upanisad. That's the boar incarnation, where Vishnu takes on that form and teaches Ribu, this great student that we've heard before, being taught by his father and grandfather, and teaches him this wisdom in various aspects of it. As you remember, and I'm not going to dally because we only have one class to get through the rest of the adhidaivavidya. That's 96 cosmic principles according to Lord Vishnu in the Varaha Upanisad. And we've looked at maybe the first 24. We haven't even glanced at all the 36 yet, but not to worry. We'll pick the best, and the rest will have to be presented to us along the way of our spiritual journey. But you can get that book, Footfalls of the Indian Rishis, and find out a lot of these charts that I'll be showing today, which are going to go by rather swiftly. I'm going to reference them just to prove the chart. And let's show the chart right away so we get started and I don't get into another long preamble because the introduction has already been given twice over the past 2 Sundays. And this is our third and final Sunday. And you can see that this is the chart that I created for the Varaha Upanishad, having to do with that Sanskrit title first, is the adhidaivavidya. These are these powerful Sanskrit words that are so indicative of spirituality. Most languages in the world, they have some portion or percentage of their linguistics given to religion, and some given to philosophy, small percent, but you don't find very much given to these subtle teachings, which are rather esoteric, which we like to put under the category, for lack of a better word in English, spirituality. We don't mean seances and occult powers and all that, which of course are blockages according to Sri Krishna. and Sri Ramakrishna to spiritual life. But when we say spirituality, we mean something that's definitely transcendent of not only body and senses, but also goes beyond the mind and goes beyond the intellect to even the finest intellect of our day, that is the savants of our Western science and so forth, and into a realm that's definitely, as Christ referred to it, an inner realm. The kings of heaven are within you. So this isn't just necessarily a fantasy, although it can be correlated with dream state. Next weekend, please come and be with us again at the seminar, which I'm going to, which I've also subtitled or maybe main titled, What Happens to Consciousness in Deep Sleep? So we go into this state of formlessness every night. And then maybe meditation, if we have a meditation practice, we go into that a couple times a day if we keep our meditations up for the period of our sadhana. So going into deep sleep, you might say, what are the first questions that would be asked about deep sleep? How was your deep sleep last night? Or what was it like? And then say, I didn't even know I had it. And the second question and answer would be, what did you experience there? And the answer would be nothing. So not knowing and nothingness, those are the two great blockages in spiritual life. So those questions would come from a person who hasn't experienced conscious deep sleep, probably hasn't even yet had any visionary dreams, because those precede deep sleep. And then when a person has visionary dreams, they'll come back to a waking state and they'll be prophets. If you have an experience that goes beyond waking and deep sleep into what they call turiya or samadhi, they'll come back to the waking state. They won't just become prophets. They'll become luminaries, or later on take birth as avatars, like the Varaha Upanisad and Lord Vishnu, whom we're talking about today. So that explains a little bit about how these states of consciousness are infilled with all these principles that broaches the topic for us in that sleep. So you can see here in the past 3 Sundays, we did go through the 5 senses, the 5 organs of action, the 5 vital airs called pranas, and the 5 subtle elements called tanmatras. And then we've also looked at the 5 gross elements, which depart the 24 and begin the 36, at least in the list by Lord Vishnu in the Varaha Upanisad. So what we also covered was the fourfold mind, but I didn't really point it out. So that's why I say hang on to whatever you're wearing, your hats, your suits, your dhotis, your saris, whatever, because we're going to go very swiftly through much of the rest of this chart in the limited time we have. Let's start out by taking up that fourfold mind, which is 4 of those 24 cosmic principles. And so much is contained in that. It's great that we had someone like Lord Kapila of the Samkhya Yoga to come up and actually tell you know what your mind consists of. And basically, they think it consists of, probably the first thing people would think was my thoughts. Mind, thought goes together. And then maybe the next thing, if they thought about it deeper, unintended, would be my intelligence. And I hope I can ferret that out and see it separate from everything else and refine it. And then the third thing would be hidden more, the ahamkara, I, aham, the cause. Kara of everything is this I, this small I that we have, causes all the problems in our life, causes all the limitations and sufferings in our life. So that's the third aspect of the anta karna. Anta means inner, karna means cause. So basically it's the inner organ, which is the cause of everything you see out here. So as we study 96 cosmic principles, probably have to keep in mind that when you talk about things like the 5 senses and the 5 elements, those have all come from the mind as far as India is concerned. They can't come just from nature. Nature itself has come from the mind. So these are mind-only schools. Sometimes they're nicknamed, some of them. And it really points to this inner life that we're talking about. If you only have an external life, like Jesus saw with his followers along the river, the fishermen and so forth, then he said, you need an eternal life. Come with me, I'll make you fishers of men. You'll have to leave the confines of this external dream you're having, this external dream of 5 elements with 5 senses attached to the objects made of the 5 elements. Renunciation is all about that, and freedom is all about that then. So in that way, that's 3 things I've noted on Takarna of mind, right? The thoughts, the intelligence, and then something that's a little bit more subtle and people don't pick up on very often is the ego. But the most subtle of all is the mind itself. They just call that manas. And the thing to know about manas, this rascal manas, is almost, when it gets in cahoots with the ego, is causes a lot of trouble. Like Sri Krishna said that. Boy, what nuisance this, what a lot of trouble this little complex of flesh and mind gets into. Just 2.5 cubits tall, he said. So he's talking about mankind getting into all sorts of trouble with this mind. So the thing about mind is that it's dual by nature. So they bring out that fact to us. It means it's always going to be thinking in terms of good and bad, pleasure and pain, bondage and liberation, virtue and vice is a stumbling block, and freedom and bondage and form and formlessness. The dualities just go on, tumbling out of this staircase of the mind, and cause people to think and believe in everything that it produces, and not to see what's beyond the staircase. That is, what's in the ceiling of consciousness, at the heights, in the bell tower, you might say, of the church, of the body-mind mechanism. So this describes a little bit, start out the antakarna, the fourfold mind. When you come to it, just remember that all of the aforementioned over the past 2 Sundays have come pouring out of that. And all of these tattvas, 96 of them, according to Lord Vishnu, are pouring out of them all the time in actually 3 states: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And then reverse that: deep sleep, back to dreaming, back to waking. And this is a breath the mind takes. We take an in-breath, we hold our breath, we let our breath out. That's the breath of the lungs. But the mind also breathes. It breathes. It takes a waking state, then it goes into dream, then it goes into deep sleep, then it comes back to dream, and it comes back to waking. And that's its breath. That's its threefold breath. So you see a lot of threefold teachings here that are coming up. So with that said, just so you know, antakarna is being talked about, let's look at what we looked at last week really quickly. That's here. It's called the 24 cosmic principles. So we're putting an exclamation point then on the top of the chart we just showed. Those 24 we've looked at pretty much. And let's add in the five elements too, because those are listed. So you see they're all listed here, and I showed you this last week, so we don't have to take a lot of time. There's the sets of 5s there, and you see them from top to bottom, 5 elements, and then across the board, 5 active senses. Above that, the 5 cognitive senses. In other words, hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, and smelling. And then across from the elements themselves, the subtle elements. So this breaks into 20, 4 sets of 5. And then add that fourfold mind, you've got 24 cosmic principles. So this is my quick conclusion for you about the chart that we just looked at. Now you've looked at the 24 cosmic principles over the last 2.5 Sundays, today included. So if we just quickly look at where all of this comes from, there you see manas, what I just mentioned. That's the 4th element of the inner organ, mind. So out of mind comes all of these things, these other 20, all connected to one another. Like hearing's going to be connected to ether, and seeing's going to be connected to fire, and water's being connected to taste, you see, and earth to smell. So all of them have their correlations and their origins inside of one another. So that's how the whole packet gets put together as Lord Vishnu is talking about the 24 cosmic principles. And he's going to add more to it, as we said, 36 and then 96 finally. All right, so mind, if you want to know the rest of mind, there it is. The ego is a part of it. The buddhi is a part of it. And the ego is, of course, that ahamkara, and the buddhi is, of course, intellect. What's not listed in copulas, which is later listed in Krishna's and other lists of tattvas, is thought. That's called chitta. So that's not on this chart, but just add that in. The mind, its thoughts, its ego, its sense of I, and its intellect. Now you've got pretty much the background or backdrop for everything that comes into manifestation. It all has to come through the castle of the mind, through the doorway of the ego, and with the power of the intellect behind it. And that pretty much then you're looking at 24 cosmic principles. Like I told you, it would be quick. You can look at this chart in Footfalls of the Indian rishis for a closer study. Quickly now, because we want to jump into the 36 cosmic principles, what's being said there next has to do with three bodies. And so let's look at this chart quickly, another quick study of an old warhorse chart that we've put out that is very helpful. And you can see here that it has the way it's set up is to show us the three bodies. So let's see here if I hope we can go back here for a second and see these three bodies and the three states of consciousness of the jiva. The jiva is the embodied being. So jiva is going to take stock of everything that's in it. It's going to say, I have a mind. That mind has an intellect. That intellect has a sense of I to it. And that all has, that's all a part of my thinking process. Like I started out today saying, may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness, right? So how that gets illuminated is by knowing this adhidaivavidya. And that's going to inform people of the modern day, the Western mind, of how the ancient Indians developed such a spiritual culture that developed so many luminaries, not just one incarnation of God, but hosts of them, many avatars and many luminaries, many liberated souls. It's like India's forte, you might say. It's this recounting and transmitting of spirituality, spiritual knowledge, jnanam or atma gyan. So we'll just look back on this really quick to show you where we are in the chart. We looked at the 24 cosmic principles on a side glance. Take another side glance or direct glance at the three bodies, because that's what's coming up next in this chart. So you can see it's listed here. And the main part of it is gross body. It's associated with the waking state. The subtle body associated with the dreaming state, and the causal body associated with the deep sleep state. And so this is an ancient teaching that's been in India for time out of mind. And it's just not the way Westerners have thought about things. They think of one body, a physical body, and one world, a physical world. But you see how the East has been not only thinking about that, but meditating upon and including in their philosophy, like Vedanta, Samkhya, Yoga, Tantra, and the worship of all these things, all of these teachings that we need to avail ourselves of in the West. I've been doing it since I was 19. I'm 74 now. So I spent a lot of time. Now I have 410 charts as of yesterday, 410 charts of what I looked at over those 60 or 70 years, 60 years. So basically, and my teacher was doing it until he was 94 and he passed away. So people come upon this adhidaivavidya or this atma gyan, this vigyan, and it completely takes them over. They say, well, that's really great. I like to dance. I like to sing the names of the Lord. I like to do my mantra. Meditation's fine, but this really grabs me because this tells me all the secrets that have been hidden. And it lifts all the veils, the false superpositions off of the soul. And now it's not a jiva anymore. It's a jivatman. And then pretty soon it's not a jivatman anymore. It's a jivan mukta, see. So that jiva avails itself of this wisdom, very soon becomes a jivan mukta. Mukti means liberation. And all of this is brought about by knowing, say, for instance, in this context, oh, I don't have just one body, I've got three. Tell me about my three bodies. Well, let's look at it real quick. We've already looked at it. We looked at it in this chart. All of this here, you see, and I'm sorry, the camera person has to go back and forth between charts as I gesture. But basically, if we want to look at the gross body, what you saw in this 24 cosmic principle body is here at the bottom. The Pancha Mahabhutas, the five elements, Deha, the body, and the Pancha Karmendriyans, the five organs of action. Shankara counts all of those as the gross body. So that's the one body everyone I'm saying is so attached to. In fact, so attached to it, they think that's all there is. Vivekananda came to the West and said, oh, the Westerners are so good and they're so gracious and generous and everything. There are only one or two problems with them. Money is their God, for number one, he said. He was the first one that coined that phrase that I can find. And the second thing is that they pay so much attention to the body as if it were the only thing. You should see how many hundreds of toiletry gadgets they have, combs, brushes, things to make their bodies look beautiful. He was going on writing his brother monks back in India. He said, you won't believe it when you come here and see the amount of vanity around the body, as if it were the only thing. Well, we'll get to this because India didn't have this vanity about the body. Even nowadays, you don't see them vain as compared to other cultures, even in their higher wisdom. So that's because they moved into the Sukshma Sharira. Pardon me while I use some Sanskrit phrases. The Stula Sharira in Sanskrit, Stula means what's gross, what's external, what's thick, what vibrates slowly, what's solid. That's Stula in Sanskrit. Take your pick of the definition. So let's go to the second body really quickly. You can see what's in it too. The Sukshma Sharira, that's a beautiful word. Sukshma Dhyan, for instance, is a kind of meditation on subtle things. Dhyan means meditation. So the subtle body, you can see what it consists of. The tanmatras we looked at over here, that is those subtle elements that go with the elements of ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And then the pancha tanmatras, and then the Gyanendriyas, the five senses of knowledge, we saw them over here, part of the 24 cosmic principles that fall into the division of the second body. And then after that, Pancha Pranas, the five modes of life force. Do you remember them from this chart? Basically, we looked at those up here. Lord Vishnu says the five vital airs. So his one beautiful system that he puts out in this Upanishad has to do with five pranas. The five pranas. And then, so those are listed. Pancha is just a Sanskrit word for five. So you can see that's part of what? The subtle body. So these organs out here that move, your legs, that excrete your food after it's been digested, and that move, those are the five active organs. They're part of the subtle body. But Shankara says the subtle Gyanendriyas are wisdom senses, which means that your seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, and smelling is put there in the body by the soul, by the Lord, if you want to put it that way, to seek the mystery and the secret behind things. You should be able to see everything, as Tantra says, as deification of principles. First, account for the principles and then salute them. Like, say, there's a God to fire, a God in air, there's a God to earth. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us and peace be unto all, because we have worshiped the gods and pleased them with our worship. We've done the five sacrifices. Want to look back and see the five sacrifices? That's another great system of fives that goes with these cosmic principles. So basically, that's how the Pancha Pranas figure into this, five modes of life force. And then you see, unfortunately, the list in the mind begins to show up are problems. Avidya is ignorance. So means ignorance or nescience of everything here in the mind. It's all, as it were, mixed up, and there's no discrimination in it. As soon as the intellect portion of the antakarna refines itself and it starts separating, doing a separation process, the real from the unreal, called neti neti, that's all of a sudden when the pool of the mind gets clearer and clearer. Before that, it was like mixing up a whole bunch of paints in a bucket, Sri Ramakrishna said. So he said the painter has a paintbrush and he's dipping it into paint and he's painting on a canvas. He wants to change his color, so he dips the brush into a jar of water, right? Cleans off the old paint, puts it in the new paint and starts painting with the new paint. So he said pretty soon that jar of water down there has to be changed because all the colors have been washed off it. They've all mixed together. See? So that means it's turning brownish black and it can't be used to clean his brush anymore. So he has to break his work, get up, go over, empty the jar into the sink, put new water in, sit down so he can start again. So this is Sri Ramakrishna's description of how to discriminate in the mind. We've dipped a brush of our desires and our experiences into too many things. And when we went to paint the canvas of life, then we dipped it in to clean things off. Pretty soon the water that we were dipping in, the water of the mind, got too brackish, too dark, and we weren't getting clean anymore. So basically, this has to do with a discrimination process of how to get rid of this avidya, or this ignorance. And then you see here, kama and karma also follow in train with the ignorance of the mind. That's desire and action. And over here, I'm not taking them up right now because of our lack of time for all of this. But basically over here, you can see how what the characteristics of each body is. And the main characteristic of the gross body is waking. The main characteristic of the subtle body is dreaming. The main characteristic of the causal body is deep sleep. So they've examined these three minds, as this chart told us that we were looking at. They've examined these three minds in context of what their functions are and who the ego becomes inside of each one of them, and how it changes, it transforms itself from Vaishvanara onwards to Taijasa, onwards to Pragya, they call that. So this is a quick run through the first two bodies of this that Vishnu mentions in the Varaha Upanisad. Not a lot to say about the causal body. As I was just saying, if somebody asks you what happened to you in deep sleep last night, it's going to be a very odd question that you've probably never heard anyone say before, because when you go into deep sleep, the antakarna disappears. The whole thing disappears. The ego certainly disappears, and the thought process disappears. Those are two important parts of the antakarna, right? So you're not going the senses disappear back into the thought process, the experience process, so they go away. So there's really nothing there, to take account of the experience you're having. It's experienceless. There's no experiencer there, at least not that we can find yet. There has to be a conscious deep sleep. Look at our seminar next weekend. We'll talk about what conscious deep sleep is and how it disappears into Turiya, gets absorbed into Turiya. So that's why the karna or the linga sharira here is very difficult to say anything about, because there's just nothing there and no one there to recount it. But the seers who have kept their consciousness single-pointed, by that I mean here, third eye, single-pointed, Agya chakra, and they've kept their consciousness as they went into dream, and they knew they were the dreamer of the dream. Other people think they're the dream, but these souls know that they're the dreamer of the dream. So if they kept their consciousness alive in dream state, then it went through the porthole into formlessness, which is called deep sleep. And they noticed that everything with form disappeared and everything went away except themselves, you see. And there's a conscious deep sleep soul. We'll get into that deeper next weekend, but they could say at that point, because of the teachings from the rishis and from their gurus, well, I think I've come upon the causal body now. I know I'm the Atman inside of its one last veil called the causal body. You can see what they'll say about it. It's not determinable. I'm not going to try and determine what it is. There's nothing there. It's where the intellect ceases to vibrate. And you might think back at the subtle body, that's not a very good thing. And in the causal body, if the intellect ceases to vibrate, that's really one of the last barriers between you and realizing your Atman, is any kind of vibration. So all of a sudden, with the disappearance of the intellect, goes away the ego who's thinking, I know, because the ego only knows through the intellect. It's like the sun only shines by the light of the Atman. So in that way, when the ego stops vibrating, the intellect gets out of the way. And this is what they call going beyond the intellectual frame of reference. Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, my guru, peace and blessings be upon him always, used to say that from the podium when he taught us Vedanta. Say, Westerners must go beyond the intellectual frame of reference. It's one of his pet phrases. So that's what's being talked about here when you have an experience of deep sleep consciously in the causal body. You'll notice that the intellect ceases to vibrate. So right away, what's going to go away besides the ego, if the intellect goes away? Thought, because intellect is what's doing the thinking, you see. So you can see how the antakarna begins to gradually meld away into formlessness. And you should be on hand to watch that. It says, and you know you're other than a body, right? Back here, you should be telling yourself in the West, I'm not the body. But then as you get into an intellectual and you begin to know your mind, eventually you're going to have to say, well, I find out that I'm not the limits of the mind either, or that the mind has limits. But it's now that I'm a seer, I'm getting into deep sleep, I realize that that was a final barrier before the ocean of consciousness opened its doors to me. And I had samadhi, or in Buddha's case, had nirvana, or in Zen Buddha's case, had satori. So all of that is very beautiful in terms of the gradual disappearance of the fourfold mind. Finally, they say about it that the mind is in its most subtle state in the causal body. And also, they notice that the three gunas went away. And if you don't know what the three gunas are and you're a Westerner, then you won't notice them go away. But you will feel their absence, and it's called bliss. So when the three gunas are coming at you, you know, one of them is tamas, slothfulness. That's painful and takes all the zest and fun out of everything. And if rajas comes at you, you can't enjoy your peace of mind because you're always restless. So the minute you try and move towards something peaceful, rajas will suggest itself in that and begin to vibrate the fourfold mind in a restless way, and you won't be able to have deep peace. So, I mean, think about back to the three breaths that the mind takes, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Now think about the lungs, how they take an in-breath, held breath, and out-breath. But there's also a cessation of breath, right? So have you ever seen people stop, or maybe you yourself have stopped and just said, I'm going to take a deep breath now. And what a marvelous effect that has on your state of mind. That's the gunas. All of a sudden, they see a master of the breath, and the gunas all of a sudden stand up and pay attention to you and salute. See, what's that? You're the master of prana? Well, I guess I can't mess with your mind anymore. See, because you've mastered the three gunas. So that momentarily taking a deep breath is putting tamas and rajas to death, at least for the time that you're conscious of the breath. And this is why they're having you do conscious breathing exercises in all forms of yoga that come from the East. And so we want to put those gunas to rest. But in deep sleep, it happens naturally. That's what the seers say. They're in equilibrium. And that goes back to a teaching about how all seeds for this body and all the seeds for this body start here. All form starts in formlessness. And when it involves, this is evolution, when it involves back to the source, then that's when everything returns to its seed form. So everything has to have a seed form. And those seeds lie strewn about the grounds, as it were, the inner grounds of deep sleep. And if you water them with the water of desire for bodies, for experiences in the seven worlds and so forth, and they sprout immediately, and people then wake up, or they dream about them, then they wake up into their dreams, and then they go back into their dreams and go back to deep sleep and see the seeds there. This happens all the time, only without their being conscious of it. Now, the whole point is we must account for more than one body. When we do, we'll find we have three bodies. When we find we have three bodies, we can explore them. When we explore them, we'll find our causal body is the source of everything, seeds. And when we find that, we'll know how to burn the seeds. And there we have samadhi and nirvana and satori and asampragyata and nirvikalpa and all the words in Indian darshanas for the highest state of awareness. So maybe hard to depart a chart this fine, but we could do it by Shankara's own quote. He says to his student, he says, "Now I will tell you what you need to know." So here's what the Western mind needs to learn from the Indian darshana, right? Now I will tell you what you need to know. It's called discrimination between the real and the unreal, or in other words, between matter and spirit. Listen carefully, then decide in your own mind what to do. So the idea is that if you find out, again, that you're more than a physical body, you'll start exploring inner life. You'll have an inner life. If you have an inner life, you're a candidate for eternal life. And once you're in eternal life, then you might as well just start shaking hands with Lord Jesus and with the Buddha. You're rubbing elbows with them in their causal bodies, and all their wisdom that they have is being transmitted to you immediately. All right, so I'm glad I got the 24 cosmic principles nicely concluded with that. And we might say that if you can show this really quickly on the screen, it will give us a better idea, in a sense, of how to look at this, how to envision it, because it's a lot. You're never going to complain about not having enough to study, or not having good things to read, or not having enough to meditate on if you enter the Vedanta, or if you enter darshanas from India like Buddhism, Jainism, yoga, that is eight-limbed authentic yoga. So in that way, you'll never have that complaint. You always have plenty to engage your mind with. So this is just a quick view, not the best image, but a good image, sort of a cartoon animation of which is very famous nowadays with people that love this on their TVs and in their movies, animation. So we'll just use that. Well, it's Sri Ramakrishna's cartoon form there, as it were, which isn't the best likeness, but it does provide all the 5 fingers of each hand. It provides the 5 toes of each foot and his whole body. So you can see there, and this is just don't run to your notes right now necessarily. This is just a conclusion of what we said about 24 cosmic principles. Let's go from his feet. There's the 5 senses of action. There's the 5 elements. Then let's go on, move on up to his knees. That's the 5 pranas, right? Am I leaving anything out so far? There's the name of the 5 pranas and what they do. Okay, so as far as Lord Vishnu's list, now we've taken 15, right, already. Now let's move up to, and we won't take what's in the middle yet, we'll just go by the columns. Let's move up to his hands. There's his fingers. Each one of them represents the 5 subtle elements called tanmatras. Tanmatras, again, it's not just, there's a sound out there, there's there's my ability to hear the sound, not just with the ears, but with the source of the ears. And it's called the property of audibility. If you want, you can call it the God of sound. And it's the same with all the others. Tangibility, visibility, flavor, and odor, as far as English can render, are straight across the board with the 5 elements. That's why they're called subtle elements. Now, there's the 5 states of cognition here: hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, and smelling. All right, now we've got everything up to his hands. Let's look at his head and shoulders. There you see 5 that we haven't shown you yet, but if there's time today, I was going to show you. It's called the 5 types of space, or ether. In Sanskrit, that word is akasha. In Tibetan Buddhism, you might say, bardos kind of idea, and bhumis in other forms of Hinduism and Buddhism, grounds, foundations. So immediately now we learn that it's associated with the head. So we have the 5 pranas here that conduct ourselves, our bodies around through our gross, subtle, and causal bodies to various levels of existence. But when we do, we find out that there are 5 different vibrating spheres there, 5 different akashas. And so if you want to say bhutakasha, everything physical. See? I mean, pranakasha, everything energetical or subtle energy. Then, and you see here, chittakasha, oh, there's the space of my thoughts, right? You see how the antakarna is also getting introduced here. Jnanakasha is, there's my intelligence, there's my wisdom. And I should probably draw a conclusion about that intelligence is mine and it's in me. I don't have to go seeking outward for it. In fact, everything I go seeking outward should prove to me that the source is inward. That's the proof of the dreaming body by the deep sleep body. That's the proof of the waking body by the dreaming body. So each thing depends upon its subtler source, an origin. And so tracing of origins is a very important thing in Samkhya and in Vedanta. Then there's Chittakasha, or sometimes Sri Ramakrishna called that the Mahakasha. That's like the great space, the space of spirituality. So if you were to learn from Indian rishis that there are 5 kinds of space, wouldn't it be just pretty much like saying, I learned from the Indian rishis that there are more than one body. So, I learned that I wasn't just a physical body anymore. I had 2 other bodies, mind and formless body. So now we must do the same with space if we've done it with form. And I'll show you how to do it with time next. So, I mean, this is called the 5 aspects of Maya: name, form, time, space, and karma. I'll show you the 4 karmas coming up, because all of those that I just mentioned are on this chart that we were looking at. Again, reorient ourselves back here. You can see there 3 bodies, 3 states we've been looking at. And what I've just mentioned is the 3 gunas of nature are coming. We looked at those already a little bit. There's the 3 types of karma. And space, here's akasha, space, you see. So that's why this chart is a very good chart to kind of ground us. And let's look back at it one more time to complete it. So that's called the panchakashas. That is the five types of space or atmospheres. Right now, people looking on, and won't even go all the way yet with this, must be thinking, what's their obsession with 5 in India? Because everything I've seen here has a 5-fold constituency. Well, it's not their obsession with it. That's the order of things. That's the way everything comes out of consciousness in 5s. 5 fingers, 5 feet. That's why we're using this. Read my book. It's called quintuplication, cosmic quintuplication. And the Upanishads also say that. When they studied all of the cosmic order inside of them, they meditated on it. They found out that everything was coming out in fives. And so this is why you have five senses. You don't look at another person saying, hey, hi, how are your five senses today? You know, pretty much just say, how are you, which means how is your body, is how most people greet each other. But there are five senses hidden there along that body. And he's got, two hands with five and 2 feet with 5 toes each. So the whole thing, if you get into the teachings, there are a whole bunch of other quintuplications that become immediately striking and set themselves up for composing a list of cosmic principles and the way, as you might say, the way consciousness got into form. Started in the seed form of the deep sleep, went to the dreaming state, took on a subtle body, then went to the physical state and took on a gross body. Well, as it did that, it said, all 3 of these bodies are mighty fine. I don't want to give them up. So it decided that it would wake and dream and go into deep sleep with them. Well, I think I'll use them each in their own area. When I'm in this body, I'll call it the waking state. When I go into my mind, I'll call it the dreaming state. And when I go into beyond dreaming, I'll call it the deep sleep state. And it's just like my threefold breath again. It's also like the 3 mantras of Om, A, U, M. Those sometimes get assigned to waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. So you're getting closer and closer to the primordial word, the unstruck sound with all of this, which is a very powerful matrix for everything that happens between Brahman and the hosts of jivas, embodied beings that take form. Well, the only thing we haven't looked at here, because I'll call your attention to, there is the Antakarana right there that we've been studying, right? Chittas, Manas, Ahamkara, and Buddhi. It's very important to know. So that's his 4-fold mind. Did I leave anything else? Yes, there's one more 5-fold thing here. The 5 types of beings. Humans, ancestors, gods, rishis, and down here, animals. Animals includes insects and plants. So you have those 5 types of beings taught as part of the cosmic principles. So you see how the whole thing covers so much territory. And so that word tattva, or principle, cosmic principle, becomes very important for understanding how and why Brahman sports in worlds with forms, name and form, time, why it gets into time, and why it creates 5 types of space for itself to enjoy and go. So that's the first aspect of that. It answers all those why questions. And then it turns life into a sporting ground. Like you get to play in the fields of the Lord rather than suffer in them, because these very things you see are also like the gross body particularly. If you begin to think I'm just a gross body, then shall we go back and look at ignorance is there in the subtle body, and kama and karma is there at the lower end of the subtle body, and everything that acts upon avidya and karma and kama has a 5-fold torture chamber waiting for it, called the 5 senses, the 5 pranas. If your prana doesn't flow right, you can't breathe right, you can't think right. So all these very things that we're talking about here, these 5-fold things, need to have this flow of prana and this awareness of mind to them. Om, apyantu, mamangani vak, pranaschakshu, shrotra matra, balamindriyani cha sarvani. May our bodies have great health. That's all of this. May our life force flow unimpeded. That's this. May our minds expand in their capacity to know Brahman. That's all of this. Because the Upanishad state, and we are studying an Upanishad, right? It's called the Varaha Upanisad. We are studying an Upanishad when we look at this, because the Upanishads state that all existence is Brahman. So may we never deny it. Not only may we not deny it, may we learn everything that leads up to realizing it as our very own self. And the koshas, I've just been reminded to look at. Up at the top, did we look at the koshas? Bunch of koshas, the 5 sheaths are across the top. Yeah. So Annamaya kosha is the physical. Anna means food, so it's a sheath of food, your body. Pranamaya kosha is your energy, your life force. That's why we studied the 5 pranas over here and then the other chart. Manomaya kosha is the kosha or container of mind and its thoughts. The Jnanamaya kosha is the container of more subtle thoughts called intellect or intelligence. And the Anandamaya kosha is where that ego becomes ripe, so that it's not such a distraction anymore from leading a life that's beneficial to ourselves and to all others, the Upanishad says. So yes, that will complete it. And these 2 quotes, you can look in Footfalls to find this chart, and you can see other 5s that are listed here too. That was, because this was a part from the introduction cover page for that book, Cosmic Quintuplications. Now let's, in the time remaining, take up some others of these. Since it comes next, we can look at the 6 transformations and the 6 infirmities. And that comes on this chart. Yes, it's very important to explore the torture chamber of the 5 elements, the 5 senses, so that we won't fall into suffering in it. And that's called studying the unreal. As Krishna says, the unreal never exists, the real never ceases to be, but both have been known by the seers. So they haven't just looked at divine reality alone and tried to pretend away suffering, ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life or fear of death. Those are called the 5 kleshas. There's another 5-fold system. I was just sitting and thinking in my own mind today before class, how many other 5s and how many other tattvas are there that are going even beyond what Vishnu says here in the 96. So I was imagining this grand, 500 and some tattvic chart that had everything in it you could possibly think of, like the 5 types of mind or the 4 noble truths. And there's this huge, huge glut, divine glut of wisdom that people feast upon when they are able to get beyond the restrictions of the physical body alone, the physical senses alone, the physical pranas alone. Because remember last week we looked at the psychic prana, right? We saw how fine the psychic prana is and how that can inform our thoughts with higher intelligence. There might be time for 2 more entries here. So let's look here at the why they want us to know about what's often stated in both Buddhism and Vedanta as the 6 billows and the 6 transformations. You can see there, Lord Buddha starts us out by saying, even as a strong current of a river sweeps away reeds on its banks, so too does Mara, death, destroy all those with worldly cravings again and again. How does he destroy them again and again? Isn't once enough? No, they come back again with their ignorance in another body, and then that'll have to be destroyed. And then they'll come back again in the next body, and that'll have to be destroyed. So they go from birth to death and death to birth, as Vivekananda says. Lord Buddha continues on. These deluded souls jump from life to life like a monkey from tree to tree. But whoever overcomes the billows of relative existence will see their sorrows duly lifted, falling away like drops of water from a lotus leaf. All the great metaphors, several of them, he puts that right there in this beautiful sloka, or 2 slokas from the Dhammapada. That's the original Buddhism in India. So he gives you then the answer to whoever overcomes these billows of relative existence. So this means you're going to want to go beyond these 6 billows. You can see them here: kshuha, pipasa, shoka, bhranti, jara, and mara. That's hunger, thirst, grief, delusion, old age, and death. Billows. It's like clouds forming in the sky and blocking out the sun and drenching the earth with rain in a not so good way, because it's always wet out there, you see. Then all of a sudden these billows just go away as if they never existed. So that's how you overcome these billows, is by knowing, for instance, man does not live by bread alone. Man does not live by breath alone. Man does not live by thought alone. Man does not actually ever live. He's eternally, he has eternal life. So life itself, outside of the vein of eternal life, is changing all the time, is cyclic. They call that samsara in Buddhism, and they call that Maya in Vedanta. The coming and going, also called the Kala Chakra, the wheel of the ancestors in time. That's going on in the 3 lower worlds, and these 3 bodies that we just talked about are participating in that. If you can bring consciousness to your dream state and your deep sleep state, that's immediately snaps the chains of birth and death. O breaker of this world's bonds. There's a beautiful song to Sri Ramakrishna that was written about, if you saw Sri Ramakrishna in your life, like so many people did, that snaps the chains of birth and death right there. Because you saw and were rubbing shoulders again with a great soul who had accomplished that. In other words, beyond the 6 billows. Last week, put out a God blog about the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, where he was talking to Keshab Chandra Sen on his deathbed. And he said to those around him and to Keshab, said, I myself have gone beyond these limitations. I was so sick at one time that my body was like a skeleton. And you could see it right here, the Buddha's body, and as he practices his austerity of days-long meditation. So Sri Ramakrishna said, I was that way myself once, and it felt like ants were gnawing on my head all the time. And it's very painful. But my mind and my mouth, my tongue continued to talk about God all the time with those around me. So if you keep your mind on God, pain and suffering goes away. So right now, I've got my mind on God. I don't feel any suffering. Hello, everyone. But as soon as the camera goes off, I stand up. I'll feel the pain in this knee, believe me. So you can take your mind up and above the body and just control it and focus it on what's real, what's true, what's beneficial, as the Upanishads tell us to do. So with Sri Ramakrishna, he said that was the way. He talked day and night to everyone around him, even though his body was about to die. And his body didn't die that time. Later on, he got cancer of the throat, and the same thing happened to them. One person asked him once, isn't that painful, that hole in the throat? He said, only when I have to come down to the body and talk to you, then I feel the pain. But as soon as you leave, my mind will go back up to the feet of Mother Kali. I won't feel this anymore. So it's not a miracle, and it's not impossible. In fact, it's very practical and probable that a person who elevates the mind, for instance, by knowing the adhidaivavidya and by meditating on it, they will learn that art of transcendence of the body, and they'll dwell more in their subtle body. After that, they'll dwell more in their causal body, because they know about them now. Before, they didn't know about them, so how could they go there? So again, as we come close to the end of this class, what the Western mind needs to learn from the ancient Indian wisdom. Well, here's another version of these 6 infirmities up the right-hand side of Lord Buddha's form. Jayati, Asti, Vardata, Jara, Kshara, and Mara. So in the case of Jayati, that's birth. Asti is growth. Vardata is disease. Jara is old age, Kshara is decay, and Mara is death. That six transformations are, it's also called sadurmi, I think, in the Pali derivative of Sanskrit. So basically, you've got a system that a lot of seekers of truth find out about. For instance, they say, well, why does God put suffering in the world? Of course, that's an ignorant question because God doesn't put anything in the world. God is beyond all worlds. But the idea is there that someone had to be the source of the suffering, and if they're all powerful and almighty, they could take it away if they wanted. So why can't that great being do that for us? That's because of the six transformations, my son, my daughter. Basically, it said birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. So immediately you memorize those and you say, whoever overcomes them will see their sorrows duly lifted, and their mind will dwell in a state of peace and bliss, where rolls the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both. Sing high, that teaching, Swami Vivekananda said. It's a quick chart and a quick thing to look at, but it is listed by the Varaha incarnation of Lord Vishnu in the Varaha Upanisad as the six infirmities. Let's wrap that up and go on to time, the five kinds of time, with another quote from the Dhammapada. Lord Buddha says, renounce all thirst and cravings, master philosophy and terminology, and take your place among the foremost of the sages. Bear this body for the last time. Think to yourself, I am the conqueror of all. I am the knower of all. I have relinquished all by the power of the self. I am liberated. I am the Buddha. Or Om Mano Bujjahamkara Chittani Naham, Nacha Shrotra Jive, Nacha Grana Netri, as Shankara, very much like the Buddha here, says that. Mano Bujjahamkara, what's that sound like? The Antakarna, right? I'm not the mind, I'm not its thoughts, I'm not its intelligence, and I'm not the ego. So he concludes nicely. Shivoham, Shivoham. Who am I then? I am Shiva, or in this case, I am the Buddha. I am the liberated one. A very beautiful quote from the Dhammapada, because sometimes you have this sort of, let's call it naive view of who the Buddha was and what he was. Like, oh, he was just meditating all the time. He didn't like knowledge and books and scriptures, and he took the Buddhists beyond their attachment to Vedanta and the Upanishads and all that. In that period that he came, does that sound like that? He renounced all thirst and cravings. He says, master philosophy. This is his advice. And master terminology. So he was very much into words and philosophy and learning all that. What's that tell us? The adhidaivavidya was in him, and he was busy bringing it out in different forms to communicate it to us. Like, for instance, in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, that's a part of that ancient wisdom of India. In a different form as it came to us through Lord Buddha about 550 years prior to Jesus. As we course along here, we've looked at then this five kinds of six infirmities, basically, and six transformations. We've looked at those. And then we could look at this time, but I think basically, since time is an issue right now, it'd be nice to look at maybe these three types of karma, because this is figuring into this extended list that goes from 36 cosmic principles to 96 cosmic principles. So maybe we can take a look at these three kinds of karma, because I'd say that probably Vishnu in his incarnation as Ram and as Krishna, who both came much later than Varaha. The boar incarnation was much earlier in the march of the 10 avatars. But later on we had Ram, and then pretty soon we had Sri Krishna in another age. So in both of those cases, in the Ramayana and in the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, you have these great teachings on karma, unsurpassed in any other scripture or teaching in India. Karma was just known by the avatar so well. So that's why I think it would be maybe good if we have enough time, or just enough time. So we have some time. So this is at least one more thing we can take up in the context of this study chart we're using. So you can see here, it's again, not real difficult to understand. It's not a real abstruse subject, but it is on a lot of people's mind, even if they only hear the word karma. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the word. There's a lot of surface teaching about it. But when you go to Ram and Krishna again, you'll get the depth teachings, the deep teachings of these. And that's where immediately you'll find out. And I've added a fourth karma in here just because it's been taken up by great souls. We're talking about the three types of karma here as one of the three of these cosmic principles that bring us up to some 96 at the end. Basically, then here's your great teaching about karma that you can relate to people if they want to know more about just, oh, that's bad karma, that's good karma. Because the next thing after that, you want to tell them, oh, yes, but there's also mixed karma. There's also three shades of karma, black, white, and gray. There's also a fourth shade of karma called clear. So there's all sorts of teachings on karma that aren't given out usually for people who are just looking for the surface meaning of the word karma, or sort of glibly passing it around to other people as if to impress them or something. But you want to go into the teachings of the scriptures and find out that how this karma affects your life. Because you see all this main picture here is we've got all this goddess flow of tattvas and teachings coming from the skies of awareness. That was our original chart here. All these waterfalls coming out of these portholes of goddess wisdom and hitting, falling and going through the seers, and through the seers, they shower upon us, upon ordinary people on earth, this beautiful wisdom. We just have to open up our minds to catch this. We have to be these, wider vases. A little thimble can't catch much. You see, and then a little tiny cup catches a little more, and then a clay cup a little more. Glass cup a little more. Shyamakrishna said, but if you want to catch a lot, then go to the glass blower and have him heat up your cup. And then he'll pull it apart and it'll become a huge glass vessel. And that will be able to contain more of this wisdom. So may our minds expand in their capacity to know Brahman. That's what I just chanted from the Upanishads. And that's what we need to do in order to take on more of this. And once that water is in our cup, it's ours forever. Then all we have to do is just recall it and recount it and teach it to others, which is what's happening here today and over the last 3 Sundays. So all of this will give us a much deeper reckoning of karma. So first thing you probably want to know, if you wanted to know more about the word karma, is there's past, present, and future. That's not too hard to grasp. In other words, the karma that's happening to me right now, that's pretty much all that people think about. But that's why I had to add in this fourth type of karma. You can see it there listed third as kriyamani. So basically, it's a karma that's arising all the time out of nowhere. It's actually is coming from, did I pull up this chart yet? I did. Okay. So it's actually rising from your past karma. That's called sanchita. And it's manifesting, it's becoming operative in your prarabdha karma. And then if you don't do something about it, it will manifest more later in your next lifetime or later in life as agami karma. Pretty much, if you know this, then you've learned this from the ancient Indian philosophy, then you're a knower of karma already. Now you just have to apply it to your life and know how to neutralize karma with spiritual practice, like 4 yogas. Let's put the 4 yogas somewhere in here. Like I'm saying, you could have a tattvic chart that just goes to the limit. So basically, if this is easy to understand, but to make it easier, Sri Ramchandra in the Ramayana talks to Sita and Hanuman and Lakshman, his divine companions, about how to put this in terms of a metaphor. So if you say Sanchita is accumulated karma from the past, so you have karma in the past, and you're taking the arrow out of the scabbard, and you haven't loaded it into the bow yet. So you see, this is accumulated karma that once it hits the bow, gets pulled and aimed, then that action is going to have its effect at some point in the future. So that's like a description of everything from past karma to present karma is in that illustration. But along the way, if you want more details, there are arrows that are already loosed from the bow that you can't call back. And that's what people are suffering in this lifetime. It's called prarabdha. So if they know the source of everything, it's from the way I thought, my thought, words, and deeds from past lifetimes are all coming current now. So I can't blame my parents. I can't blame God. I can't blame the devil. I can't blame religion. I can't blame anyone but myself for doing these acts that I accumulated in another birth. And then when I came to this body from my causal body to my subtle body to my gross body, right? We keep this in mind. As consciousness came down through those bodies, I wasn't able to, in the ancestor realm, say in heaven, I wasn't able to dispel these karmas with the light of realization. I had to come back to earth and find a teacher who could tell me, neutralize these karmas now. I'll give you permission. I'll give you the mantra for it. I'll give you practice for it. I'll give you the wisdom for it. And then you can be free of this karmas by the time you pass from the body. And traditions like Tibetan Buddhism are big, have been big for the last several decades here in the West, helping to teach us this. So that's arrows already loose from the bow. Oops. That wasn't very well considered. They're going to hit their mark. They're going to have some sort of effect. It's interesting how when we talk about something like this, it's always negative. But I want to make a point here that good karmas have been accumulated and good karmas have been loosed from the bow. And they're going to have their effect too. So you see people getting good things in their life. And so that must have come from good arrows they shot, you see. A good has also been compared to a golden chain, whereas bad has been compared to an iron chain. So both of them will bind is the point there. The gold chain is better, but having good effects come back will still cause a penchant for doing good. And we just said the antakarna, the dual mind, manas, is always into good, bad, pleasure, pain, and virtue and vice, happiness and sorrow. And to get liberation, you want to get beyond those dualities. You can't keep holding them lifetime after lifetime because do-gooders, you never see them get enlightened. It's only those people who have gone beyond dualities, like, say, heaven, earth, and hell, have gone beyond, say, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, have gone beyond, say, tamas, rajas, and sattva. All this wisdom is to be learned so that you can get beyond your limitations. That's what you use wisdom for. It's not just wisdom to collect. Unfortunately, that's what we've fallen into here in the West. I think I'll just put it in the library and let it collect dust. But we have to basically act on it and use it. And higher wisdom is particularly useful for that. You utilize it for enlightenment. That's the thing that you want, freedom. Freedom from what? Well, let's just go back to the dualities. So basically, I'm bringing that forth because of all the good karmas. And on top of that, because I mentioned the three shades of karma, there's also mixed karma, where black and white get together and make gray. And that's a very confusing karma for people. If they're under the press of a cycle of that, a gunic cycle, if you get my meaning, then all of a sudden they'll do a good act, and a couple days later something bad will happen, and they'll go, "What? Well, why does that happen?" Or they'll see somebody doing a bad act, and then the next day they win the lottery or something. You see, and so it doesn't make sense to them. It's all confused and convoluted. So this is why this witness consciousness has to stand back, know this wisdom, wait, be patient, and determine its actions and its thoughts on the basis of mother wisdom. She herself is there. That's why we say here, God's flow of tattvas and teachings, stand under it like the rishi did. It'll flow right through you and pass it on then. Now that you've found Sri Krishna, I want you to merge in him. Ramakrishna got the prana. But as you do on your way to merging, won't you turn and help others? Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi said to us. So this has been part and parcel of understanding what good mixed and bad karma is. But then let's go on with the arrows being taken from the scabbard is new karma. So the thing about that is if you learn the teachings of karma, you might slap your own hand, when you reach back to take that arrow that hasn't been loosed from the bow yet. You could just leave it there. You could think better. You could be wiser. You could act wiser. You could think wiser, and you could do wiser. And so you say, well, I don't think I will do that act. That's discrimination in action that we just talked about. That's based on knowing the difference between the real and the unreal, and then stopping the habitual act from partaking of that risk or that chance of reaching for another arrow. And so in that way, you find that arrows being loaded into the mo are potential karma. And so not just enough to tell his divine friends, Sita, Rama, Sita and Lakshmana and Hanuman, about the three kinds of karma, and a fourth one there too. He uses a beautiful metaphor of the bow and the scabbard to help us really understand deeply these karmas. And the rest of the chart's basically the four shades of karma. I already talked about them. And this another, as far as the transcendent goes, interesting to put together the great Shaivite and Advaitas Shankara with the avatar of Vaishnavism, Ram. And here's what Shankara says about it. The fire of knowledge destroys that which has previously been done. That's here, right? Your past karma. The fire of knowledge that we're learning right now in action and expansion, as we said, will destroy all of those karmas that have previously been done, sanchita. And what one has yet to do in the future, of course, that'll get destroyed. But what is done, it cannot destroy. That's arrows loosed from the bow already. What has already been done, you'll have to suffer or enjoy the effects of that karma that's already been done. That's called prarabdha karma. It cannot destroy the prarabdha. However, so what's the way out of a being who has these karmas in this life and is suffering or enjoying from them? He says, stay close to Brahman, because if you do, you're never afflicted or affected by these three. Those beings who do that, they are Brahman, free of qualities. They, again, as I was just describing, they transcend three gunas, three bodies, and different sets of fives and triputis. We did have time then to take up that four types of karma. Listed on this chart. So I think probably that is as much as we're going to do. We probably didn't do all 96, But as I said, all of these you can find teachings for in that very helpful and welcome book called Footfalls of the Indian Rishis. We finally put that out 4 years ago, and it relieved us greatly because now people could go to it, and when they couldn't contact myself or others, they would have the source book right there. So we heavily encourage you and to find a copy of that book and do some great study of the adhidaivavidya and all the cosmic components of Divine Mother's realms of wisdom. But we can end here with a hymn to end our 3-class series on adhidaivavidya, what the Western mind needs to learn from the ancient Indian wisdom. Nimitam manas chakshuradi pavritam nirashakita kasha kalpika ravi loka chesta nimitya tataya sanitya palabdas swarupahamatma Yamagnushnavad nijabodha swarupam manas chakshurari yabodatma kani pravartantra ashrita nishkampam ekam sanitya palabdis swarupahamatmam Sanitya palabdis swarupahamatmam. Om. Without the sun, no terrestrial actions are possible. Yet the light of timeless awareness allows the sun its moment of glory. That inner radiance, vast and conditionless, illumes the corridors of the mind and the 5 senses. That light am I, pure and boundless, attributeless and free, comforting and life-giving, like the quality of warmth and fire, whose nature is always awake, all-abiding, and one without a second, who animates inert objects, mind, and senses, and engages them in action. That self-aware entity am I, sublime and indivisible. Sanitya palabdis swarupahamatma. Sanitya palabdis swarupahamatma. Sanitya palabdis swarupahamatma.